Our team at Atlanta Construction Podcast is excited to announce our newest partner, Luminous Labs. Luminous Labs is the leading provider of architectural visualizations for developers, homeowners, architects, and more. Luminous Labs has a team of experienced designers and visualizers using cutting-edge technology to bring your 3D renderings to life. Using these architectural visualizations will give you a sense of scale, space, and design, allowing you to make informed decisions about your projects before construction even begins. These high-end architectural visualizations are a perfect tool for presentations, marketing materials, and design reviews, allowing you to communicate your vision to stakeholders, clients, and more. This episode is brought to you by our presenting sponsor, Pezant Building Products. Pezant Building Products has been providing contractors and builders with the supplies necessary to complete their jobs since 1964. They have built a reputation of honest, helpful, and quality service, serving the HRM for the last 58 years, now with 7 locations in Nova Scotia and 1 in New Brunswick. Our team at Atlanta Construction Podcast is extremely excited to announce our new co-branded partner, Procore. Procore is the global leader in construction management software. We'll be conducting several podcast episodes with Procore users and construction companies across the country in 2023, among many other things. Stay tuned. We're excited. Okay, welcome back to the Atlanta Construction Podcast. Very pleased to have with us today Mark MacDonald with Catalyst Sales and Marketing, and also with Electric Avenue. Mark, how are you, man?
Excellent. It's my first time. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for doing this, and thanks for stepping up for your first podcast.
Awesome.
Yeah, no, it's looking forward to our conversation, and I got to start with, so you took up some beach volleyball here in the last few years. How's that going for you?
I don't even know if you call it research into your guests, but somebody slipped you some the inside track on my inside info. My athletic career. Yeah, no, I was looking. It was a rebirth in sports for me. I was looking.
So what was your sport before that? A couple of different ones? I would say,
fortunately or unfortunately, like most Canadians, like men, you play hockey. So I played hockey, played high school hockey, and then just like kind of fell out of love with the sport. And then
what caused that?
Well,
don't want to go into it.
No, I don't know. It's just like where it fits in your life. Like, yeah, okay, when you're young and it's the only thing you have going on, there's lots of time for it. It's a great sport.
But there was a time where you thought like you'd try to go.
I never thought that. There was pressure to pursue it as someone like 6'5".
From coaches or parents?
Parents mostly.
Yeah, because of your size.
Size, yeah. And my father absolutely loved the sport. My mom loved the sport.
Were you defenseman?
No, I was up front. First one in the corners. 6'6", get down there and grind.
And you were big like when you were younger as well, right?
Big, yeah, big. But that was it. Like I loved basketball growing up. Loved a lot of sports, but hockey was so much the focus of like the community I grew up in.
We can all relate to that, Atlanta, Canada.
That's it. That's what I mean. There's a million stories like mine, but yeah, I was in my mid-20s. I was totally single and I was playing golf all the time. So I love golf. I had some friends who love golf, and one day me and a buddy were just like, man, it's a great sport, but it's not very social. So we literally, and my partner now, Kaylee, she's heard this story a million times, but we literally Googled best sport to meet women.
Really?
And beach volleyball was
I should have guessed. This is the reason.
Top of the list. And people who know me and know me well, like one of my attributes, for better or for worse, is like I'm pretty relentless. Like whatever you give me,
you're gonna go after it.
I'm gonna go 100%. After it. Yeah. So it started as that. And I ended up meeting my partner, Kaylee. We're about to have our first baby in July.
This beach volleyball.
She played beach volleyball, met her at the WEG. And so it was kind of mission accomplished.
Oh, they got courts down at the WEG?
Yeah, great.
I thought it was just tennis courts down.
I don't know if they're still there. There used to be a league, but now they built phenomenal courts over in...
up in the waterfront? No.
We play on the waterfront.
Got to bring your own net, though.
Bring your own net. We do it all the time. But over in Burnside, RBC Center, I think it's the RBC Center where you play hockey, and there's the football, soccer.
Yeah.
There's like 14 courts. Yeah, beautiful courts. Awesome. So anyway, met her, mission accomplished, and I was like, I just never gave up on the sport. So I went from never touching a volleyball in my life to...
At what age?
God, this is 30.
Okay. You started playing at 30.
Started playing at 30.
That's crazy, man. Good for you. It takes some courage to start late like that, eh?
It was frustrating. The interesting thing about new business endeavors, new whatever endeavors...
Yeah, it shows your entrepreneurial spirit, too.
That, and I just find like it's so fun early because it's like the growth curve is so quick. You go from nothing to a new sport. Like every day you can see and feel the improvements.
You're making rapid growth right away. Yeah.
You plateau at like hockey, you plateau at golf. Like to go from an 80 to a 75 might take you 5 years and a lot of effort.
Yeah.
So I find new is always fun. I think there's a term for it. They call it the storming phase, right? You get into a new business, you get into a new sport, everybody storms in.
Yeah, it's exciting.
And then you get the normalization. You kind of norm out.
Honeymoon phase over.
That's it. And then there's this gap, and a lot of people just don't make it through the gap. But yeah, for me in volleyball, I just stayed with it.
Yeah.
Ended up winning a bunch of tournaments with, I think my best part of volleyball is my recruiting skills. Like, excuse me, ex-national team players.
Recruited your wife.
Yeah, true. Recruited my partner, my male volleyball player.
Oh, your partner, sorry.
Yeah. No, yeah, she's not wife yet, but yeah.
Oh, that's awesome, man.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of people, if they hadn't played volleyball much or hadn't played at a high level, wouldn't maybe appreciate how awesome of a sport that it can be to play and how fun it is.
Agreed.
Not that I've played it at a serious high level, but I have played a lot, and it's unreal.
Yeah, agreed.
It's a fun sport.
Agreed. And it's so social. You can play it outdoors. You can play it on trips down south, whatever.
Yeah.
It's just one of those great games. There's a bunch of sports coming out, even spike ball, all those things.
Spike ball, yeah. What's pickleball is a big one right now.
Haven't played it. I've seen it.
Drew
I'm
Brees
interested.
just bought a pickleball franchise down in New Orleans.
Come on.
They got franchises now. This sport's like getting huge.
I see it on ESPN all the time.
Yeah, it's the next big thing.
Yeah.
I haven't even played yet. I got to try though. I think they're building some out in the Bedford Commons or something like that. Like,
they need them. Yeah. It sounds like it.
But that's a good segue into you being the founder and co-owner of Electric Avenue. Obviously, you're with Catalyst Sales and Marketing too. But a lot of times we like to talk about just a little bit about your education, your time in university or in college, and then onward, kind of how you got to where you are today. Maybe you can kind of give us the Cole's notes on a little bit of your journey.
Yeah. So for me,
tough to do, but
yeah,
we short amount of time.
Yeah, we touched on it earlier, but for me, I always had a love for technology and entrepreneurship. Like very young age, I remember, God, I was born in '82, and my father, this is like MS-DOS. My dad brought home a computer, big investment for him at the time. It was running MS-DOS, and I remember just being enamored with this thing. Like
I remember that too.
Right?
So I'm 37, so not that far out.
Not that far.
Age, and I remember the first computer with the old operating system.
Like no Windows. I remember pre-internet. Like we used this thing called BBS, like bulletin board services, to like dial up on your old screeching modem to download all these different things at the time. But I think that, like looking back, was pivotal for me, like seeing that technology, falling in love with technology at an early age. And I just followed it into college. So I pursued electronics engineering.
Okay.
So ended up going to Toronto, like born here, grew up in New Brunswick, ended up in Toronto to go to school, technical college. And there was kind of like this quick path at the time. This is the height of the dot-com bubble, when every tech company in the world really was overvalued relative to where it landed after the crash.
Like the dawn of Silicon Valley.
Totally. That's what it was. Like nobody knew who was going to be the Google or the Amazon, but everybody thought everyone was going to be.
Yeah.
So anyway, finished college, wanted to do my electrical engineering, and it was Nortel Networks. And it was the largest, I think it was the largest publicly traded company in Canada at the time. Blue chip stock. Everybody had investments in them. They came to the school. They're like, hey, start with us. We'll pay for your engineering. I'm like, perfect. Career set. Toronto, 19, 20 years old. I was like, this is great. My life's set.
Yeah.
And within 1 year, I was on a picket line. And 6 months later, I like came back to New Brunswick with my tail between my legs, didn't know how to save.
Right.
Didn't know anything about the workforce, economics. I was like, oh my God. And it was really, I reflected recently, and it was kind of that moment where it was like, I can't rely on somebody else. And really that was early 2000s, 2003, 2004 started my first business. So got into business. We were doing automation, networking systems, me and another partner, and was lucky enough to sell that and got to know some people within the electrical wholesale industry at the time. And then started Catalyst, really, or a version of Catalyst. The name has changed over the years, but started in the rep world. So still got to like be in love with the technology I was always in love with, but now get to be on the business development, sales side, kind of what my strength was, or what it was appearing my strengths were. Right.
So you're realizing at that time, like even though you pursued engineering, electrical engineering, the sales side, the entrepreneurial side, like, so it seems like you have both. I think it's just kind of unique. A lot of engineers are a lot more focused, not necessarily introverts, but sales is maybe not their thing, right? Or starting their own business with that approach isn't always the case. So,
agree. Yeah. Yeah, there's a great book. I think it's called The E-Myth, and it talks about...
Yes, that is a good book.
Yeah, and it talks about like the hats we all wear, and it's like management, entrepreneur, visionary. There's a few categories. And
similar
one's
to Traction that way.
Yeah, they kind of pull from the same school of thought, and technician is one of them. So I think a big part of me is still like technician, like love getting on the oscilloscope in the office, or like getting in the back end of the firmware on the chargers or whatever it may be, but also love the entrepreneurial vision approach. hate the management stuff.
Right.
Right. So I think
operationally, not so
Operation-
much, but
yeah.
vision, creativity, like carrying things forward, seeing down the road where you're headed.
That's it.
Yeah. So I'm interested. Is it tough for you to sacrifice the technician side? Because they talk about that in the E-Myth, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the best person in the kitchen who's really good cook or at baking start their own restaurant, and they want to be out there doing the technical stuff, right? Because they're skilled, it's artistic, it's got this, you know, and they have a hard time sacrificing that for staying away from the task-oriented stuff to carry the vision forward. Is that something you battle with every day? Is that something you struggle with?
Every day. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No question. And
It's an identity thing almost too.
it is. And it's really come down to, like, you know, there's another great book, Traction, or sorry, it's related to James Clear. I forget the name, but anyway, it talks about, you know, the habits, right? And just creating these habits. And that's one thing for us, like as an organization, we've always worked with some great business coaches and great business mentors. Like we went through a program with Simplicity. They're a company based out of Bedford. And they sat down with us, and what they did to help with the habits of not falling back into those loops where it's like, oh, I'm not putting enough effort where I need it to be. So they really helped us identify where we as an organization and like we as individuals should spend our time.
Right.
Right. So once I figured out, okay, this is where I need to spend my time, and then putting the processes in place to create those good habits to make sure I'm not getting pulled too far into the weeds, if you will, and I'm focused on where my energy and efforts serve the business like the most value.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting, man. Thanks for sharing that. So can we talk a little bit about Catalyst sales and marketing before we kind of dive into Electric Avenue? So this is, you're carrying a lot of different lines in the lighting world here.
Yeah.
You said you're dealing with people, you know, a lot of legitimate suppliers like Rexel and this kind of thing. Maybe you can just kind of give us like an overall, because this has been quite a few years, right, since this has been operational.
Yeah, and I think most people who know me in the construction industry would know me from Catalyst.
Right.
And that was, since selling that networking automation company in the early 2000s, transitioning into the agency sales world. Catalyst signs contracts with manufacturers who don't want to have a direct sales force in a market. So we specifically geographically represent Atlantic Canada.
Okay.
So if you're a manufacturer of lighting, if you're a manufacturer of electrical products, because we're very specific in our channel, we only sell electrical or do the business development or representation for electrical equipment. So you would look at agencies like Catalyst, you say, hey, we're going to hire you. You're geographically going to cover us for Atlantic Canada. Mm-hmm. And we try to pair or select manufacturers who kind of complement each other. So lighting is a big piece of our business, decorative lighting, residential lighting, many in that world, the design world, the architectural world would know us from that. Mm-hmm. And we have everything from commodity plugs and switches to pipe and wire. If you're an electrician, there's a chance that we kind of rep or do business development for manufacturers that you would buy that product from. To the retailer. Correct.
And only they're dealing with the subcontractors and electrical companies.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good caveat. Yeah, it's only B2B.
Yeah.
So we're only calling on our vertical. So our customer is really the electrical wholesaler. You mentioned the Rexels, the Wescos, the Gray Bars, the Eddy Groups.
Yeah.
Those wholesalers who only sell to electrical contractors.
Yeah.
So that's our customer. And then the influencers, if you will, in our channel are the electrical engineers, the electrical contractors, the developers who are making decisions, on some of these electrical products directly.
Yeah.
That's kind of where we spend our time from a traditional sales and marketing standpoint, trying to influence the decision-making process on the sphere.
And that would include, does that include kind of catching things upstream, dealing with a lot of architecture firms in their design, preliminary design engineers too, like trying to get workier products into the spec?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's kind of like the holy grail for anyone in my space. If you can build those relationships, find the right solutions, a lot of time it is a solution they're trying to do, especially with architects, they're trying to do something very specifically. Hey, here's the vision.
Yeah.
Okay, product expert, how do we go solve this? Even for me, I carry a LC designation as a certified lighting designer.
Okay.
So I'm able to kind of add, or traditionally was able to add, that layer of knowledge and expertise when they were looking for products. And a prime example not too far from us is Queensmark. We worked with McKay Lyons, Sweet Apple very early on.
Which part? Which
the interior. So we helped them with all the interior suite lighting, and ended up luckily
in the hotel portion.
The residential suites. Yeah. So we were lucky enough to work with the architect who
FBM, Fowler Ball Mitchell.
They were doing, I believe, the construction drawings on that piece. So it was Brian McKay. I think it's McKay MLS, McKay Lyons Sweet Apple. They're up here on Gottingen. Up here on Gottingen Street. So we worked with them because they had a vision for how these residential units should look from a lighting perspective. And we were able to put a package together like, okay, here's how you solve exactly what you're trying to achieve. And then we were lucky enough to supply the equipment on the project.
Well, this must be a satisfying one for you to look back on.
Yeah, those are always feathers, and those are great stories, especially buildings like that are so iconic, and it's great to be able to be a part of stuff like that here in Halifax.
Yeah. I mean, it's they're getting like some of these buildings got like the Canard is going up now, and the Nova Center just finished before Queen's Mark started. It's almost like every year we add a new like signature building on the waterfront or somewhere downtown. It's crazy. Yeah,
well, I'm in the West End. I was actually on top of Dexel's got a building there off Mumford.
No, not the George.
No, it's off Mumford.
Does it have a number in the name of the building?
Yeah, something West, like 33.
Yeah, West 22.
Yeah, West 22.
Yeah, that's right.
So yeah, speaking of these iconic buildings, that's one in my opinion. But we were up on the parapet. We were up on the roof, just on the edge of the parapet this morning, looking at some lighting we had done to light the exterior top fins of the building, and looking out.
Is it like tube line lighting or something? Or
it's a really cool product. It's actually it's made to replicate traditional neon, but it's silicone embedded LED. So it gives the effect, and it's got DMX controllers. You can do different lighting. You know, you guys are good with lighting in here, but you can do all these different lighting scenes, lighting colors. But as I was up there, I was looking out over the Rotary, and there's 177.
Yeah,
right, that new building. So another iconic one in a really interesting spot.
Yeah, the skyline is changing here
very much so. You could see Richmond from down there.
Richmond Yards, so I think I don't know if I'm probably gonna get this all wrong, but Richmond Yards, I think there's a 34-story tower. 177, I think is 35. I don't know what West 22 is. It wouldn't be quite that high, but it's got to be in the high 20s, because for a long time it was 27 stories was Fenwick Tower, which was the highest. And now, like, everybody's exceeding 30, so things are, in past that milestone now.
It's a new world. Cool. Yeah, I think I got off on the 22nd floor at West. Yeah, so that sounds right. And then 35, I can almost confirm for 177. But Richmond looks big and tall. It's impressive.
That's an impressive block, because it's a whole block of the city that there's like 11 buildings over 11 years or something. Right?
Yeah, and the pace of it's incredible. Kudos to those.
The pace is insane.
To Westwood, yeah.
Yeah, it's no wonder, and I'm sure Bird Construction is there for a reason to help out on that side of things. And it's insane how fast it's going up. It's crazy.
It's showing. Yeah,
I think we were talking earlier about your involvement in is it EO?
Entrepreneurs Organization.
Yeah, because I think Jimmy Lorway, who's in that, his company Anvil did the cladding at the building that West 22.
I think you're right.
That was one of. I don't want to get this wrong, Jimmy might be listening right now, but that's probably one of the bigger jobs he's gotten. Like, I know he's got some stuff with Dexel, and he's doing great. But I think that was a pretty milestone project for him, and it looks amazing. I'm sure you noticed when you're up there.
Yeah, the cladding. I think Dexel probably gets a lot of compliments on their architecture, but that building specifically, and if he did it, it looks like they did a phenomenal job. Hopefully it went well. But yeah, Jimmy is in EO. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, and no, Dexel is one of the only larger developers who has their architecture firm internally, right? Because they've got their own, and I'm sure that makes things a little more streamlined when they're designing these buildings, right? Like, they're in full control kind of thing.
Yeah, and I remember Chris was on here, and I listened to that podcast. He was talking about it, and it's kind of a mix for them too. It sounds like now, where we'll get our in-house to make sure things move, and then certain visions on these buildings, they'll bring in outside architectural firms as well.
Yeah, I just said WM Ferris does that too, but then their architecture firm helps design everybody else's too, right? That's how it works.
Yeah.
But so moving on to Electric Avenue, you started this in 2021, very focused on EV chargers in both residential and commercial. You can definitely explain it better than me, but this is a really forward-thinking kind of, this is something that a lot of developers are getting in on now. You've had some success in the city already, and certainly got to be a good time to be have such a keen focus on this renewable product in commercial space.
Yeah. So the backstory is, going back to Catalyst, we, as an organization, we sat down, this is probably 5 or 6 years ago, and we're, like many contemporary businesses, are like, what are we trying to do? Why do we exist? And how do we make decisions? And we settled on, like, sustainability has been a big part of my life. Outdoor lifestyle has been really important, from, backcountry skiing to
beach volleyball.
Yeah, we do some eco racing, like, you name it, just like the outdoors, the environment.
What's eco race?
They stopped doing it actually, but there was it's a orienteering race. We always used to do it here. It's 24 hours, 50. It's a 50 by 50 kilometer map. They put you in the middle of the woods. You get a compass and you get a compass and a map, and it's like,
so it's a race.
It's a race.
So you're running, or?
Yeah, well, if you can. Yeah, it's 24 hours, but yeah, definitely running for a big piece of it.
No way.
But yeah, outdoor, it was always important to me. And as a business, we're like, what are we going to do? Because we were into LED lighting. We saw the push coming in our market from an efficiency standpoint. So as an organization, as Catalyst, we settled on, we're just going to help others achieve environmental sustainability through electrification. That was now our new guiding light. Every decision we make, it had to check that box.
Right.
Got into solar about 4 years ago, or close to 5 years ago, and we've been lucky enough to supply almost like 2 megawatts of solar into Atlantic Canada through Catalyst.
Okay.
And then like the EV charging conversation came up like 4 years ago, and at the time, it's not the buzz that it is now, but it was still, people were talking like, what's going on with this market? What infrastructure is needed in this market? And we said, we couldn't make the economics make sense at the time 4 years ago, but we said, hey, it aligns with our purpose. It aligns with our vision, aligns with our why. So we said, let's find some EV charging product to rep through Catalyst. And we found a manufacturer. But when we got in this space, it wasn't like a traditional electrical wholesale product. People in the space, they were tech companies out of Fremont and San Fran. Right. They were chasing software as a service subscriptions. They were chasing ARR revenue. They didn't know about our channel. So we ended up signing a deal we didn't love with a company we didn't love. And we started deploying their infrastructure. And we had a lot of success early on through a federal program. It's called ZEVIP, Zero Emission Vehicle Infrastructure Program.
Okay.
This program through Enercam pays for 50% of charging infrastructure.
Wow.
And we ended up landing a really nice deal. It was amazing to work with them. I think it's a phenomenal business story. But Killam Properties here in Halifax, they ended up purchasing over 420 chargers for their buildings across Canada. And through that process, we learned so much, but we learned a whole lot of things about what not to do, because this manufacturer we were working with, whole lot of issues. There was other things we didn't love. Like once you buy their hardware, you're locked into their software for life. There was a lot of business things we didn't love.
Yeah.
Got frustrated with the whole process. We had some other issues with them. So we said, you know what, forget it. Let's do it ourselves.
Really?
It aligns with our vision. It's not that complicated. Let's figure out this charger and let's figure out the software and let's just come up with a better solution.
Integrate it all, holistic.
Integrate it all. So yeah.
Can I ask, like, just for our listeners, for context, 420 chargers across Canada. So like how many per property?
Great question. I think it was like between 2 and 5%.
So parking lot
of their total.
Not in the parkade, not those kind of units, like in the parking lot.
Both.
Or both.
Both private and public. But yeah, multi-unit residential is it's the most influential space, in my opinion, that you can put chargers in right now. Because the government our government that's funding these chargers, they're trying to change consumer perception. Because right now, the number one thing, if you're polled or the average person's polled, hey, do you want to own an EV? It's like, well, I don't trust how far they drive. I don't trust there's enough infrastructure to support it. Yeah. So multi-unit residential is so important because somewhere close to 90% of the time you charge electric, you charge it at your destination. And your destination is normally your house. But if you live in a multi-unit, which I read some data recently, almost 31% of Canadians live in a multi-unit, and that's only getting worse. So yeah, like these chargers
getting worse as in it's growing.
Yeah, more people are living in an apartment. Well, it depends what size you're on.
Okay, just want to clarify. Sorry, because I live in one.
Yes, sorry.
And sometimes I wish I did. So
correct.
Could be either way.
Yeah, it's becoming more costly to own a home.
Yes.
Interest rates are going up.
Oh, for sure.
It's becoming harder to own a home. So when I say worse in the sense,
it's maintenance free.
It's true. There's a story for both sides, and I know a lot of developers who listen to this probably they're happy happy with that statistic.
You're plugging them all.
Yeah, but so the chargers are going in the parkades where the tenants park. That's the primary reason, like a Killam is deploying them to give their tenants.
Right.
And then for the government, like this over deployed infrastructure. So say for Killam, it was 2 to 5% of their total parking portfolio. At the time, there was less than 1% of Canadians who owned an electric vehicle. So the government's achieving their goal because they're changing consumer perception. You pull into that parkade, like in your building, you see 10 unused chargers. You're like, oh, maybe I can buy an electric vehicle because the infrastructure's there.
Yeah. And this is 10 years ago, probably.
Yeah. Well, the program really only started about 4 years ago, this federal program that funds it. Okay. And now it's evolved into all these streams. We actually worked with pretty much Clean Foundation exclusively on their EV Boost program.
Okay.
So now they're kind of re-administering these funds regionally. So we've helped a lot of developers access those funds because it's 50% of everything, 50% of chargers, electrical labor, engineering fees. You know, the programs pay for half of everything to get these chargers in your buildings.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That makes the getting that business off the ground a lot easier.
Yeah, it was a whole lot easier to bootstrap for sure. You know, traditionally when you enter, because there's a tech component to this space, you know, we have software to allow you to monetize the chargers, right? Because you want to be able to bill your tenants because you're using your house meter, your energy to supply power to these tenants. So you need a way to recoup that cost. Yeah. So the software piece, there's a bunch of technical pieces to it. So yeah, traditionally, you know, this early into a market, you'd probably need some financing, or you'd have to go and dilute equity to raise enough capital to get into the space. But for us, yeah, with the government paying for 50% of things and paying pretty quickly, it made it a whole lot easier to bootstrap the business with our own equity. Yeah.
Right. So is it typical if you're in a building where there's charging stations in a parkade, you're paying the building owner, and the building owner is generating revenue from that charging station?
So we use,
is that typical?
That's not typical for us, fortunately for us, and I'll explain why. So that model is pretty typical. If you go to Enfield for say, let's say, and you see the Tesla fast chargers out in Enfield, they've got e-fast chargers or all-ac, or you know, you see some flow chargers off the highway. Typically those are a lease model where, hey, I'll lease the space and I'm going to collect the revenue from the charging, or there's some revenue share. The nice thing for apartment building owners, in my opinion, and for us as a business, if you get funding from the government to deploy this infrastructure, it requires you to own it. So you have to buy it as the developer or the building owner. So you would buy the infrastructure from us or for whoever. But what's nice about that is you keep all the revenue. So we have ROI cases on apartment buildings here in Halifax where it's less than a 2-year payback. This hardware is warranted for 5 years. It'll probably last you 10 anyway.
And then they're using your software.
And they're using our software, and that ROI includes the software fees. So yeah, but that's our business model. Hardware is kind of secondary to getting you the software that you need to control access to the chargers, but also collect revenue or monetize the energy that's going into these vehicles.
Quick shout out to the newest sponsor of the show, the Stone Depot. The Stone Depot is located in Bears Lake, Halifax, but serves all of the East Coast. The showroom over 8,000 square feet, perfect for masonry contractors, landscaping contractors, builders, developers. Regardless, the Stone Depot is a great option for you, whether you're doing fire pits, patio stones, kitchen and interior stones. So if you're looking for a great stone supplier, visit the Stone Depot. This episode is brought to you by Airtight Spaces. Airtight Spaces is Atlantic Canada's first authorized aero barrier dealer. They help create comfortable, healthy, and durable living environments with the added benefit of energy efficiency. Air sealing is a critical step towards net zero buildings. Using air pressure to automatically guide sealing guarantees the highest quality results in the least amount of time with the least amount of effort. If air sealing is important to you, you can visit Airtight Spaces at www.airtightspaces.com. Pivot Bookkeeping is your one-stop shop and customizable bookkeeping, tax, and filing service. With Pivot, you have the peace of mind knowing your taxes are always filed on time and your bookkeeping is reconciled often. Using their non-proprietary software and applications, all of your business finances are securely handled by their local account managers. Pivot takes great pride in providing you with unlimited support and a direct line to your account managers right here in Nova Scotia. Whether you're an established business looking for new options and increase efficiency, or a newer company looking to build a solid foundation for future growth, Pivot has a product that can be modified to your needs. Consider making the pivot today. Book a free consultation at pivotbookkeeping.com.
Yeah, so you've got these incorporated into your design. You've bought the full hardware software package. You now have a building where it's either multi-res or even a retail space or a place of business. You're offering this eco-friendly. It's good for your employees. It's good for your tenants.
It's good for everybody. Yeah. Depending on what side of the fence you're on this, I think the jury's still out for a lot of people.
Right. And is that what you find when you deal with in Atlantic Canada, say developers particularly? Like it's a bit of a tough sell right now, or is it getting better for you?
It's getting better, no question. Like when we initially went out and solicited our network of developers, it was only a handful. It was Killam, it was J2K, Jim and John Kanalakis. You know, there was a handful 3 or 4 years ago who went after some of this funding. And I mentioned their names because it's all public knowledge. So if you receive funding from the government. And
they're front runners, right?
Correct. Yeah. So they were early adopters, in my opinion, in this market. But as time has gone on, and it may be less of our sales pitch as a business and more of this happening where tenants are saying, hey, I just bought a Tesla. Or,
I
hey,
need one. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
So I find it's a mix now. Before it was progressive, forward-thinking developers who were deploying this infrastructure.
Now they almost need it.
Now, it's becoming, it was kind of an amenity and now it's a commodity, necessity.
Yeah.
So the shift's starting to happen despite despite what side of the coin you may be on. The jury's still out for some. Whether
So
this is
there's
the
got to
path.
be like a percentage now already where if you've got a 100-unit building and there's 50 to 80 or 100 parkade spots, 10% are probably driving an electric vehicle. Would be that high right now?
It wouldn't be that high. It would be that high from a new vehicle sold. So I think globally we're hitting close to 15% of new vehicles sold like last quarter globally. Yeah. And then you've got hotspots like say Vancouver, Quebec, that may be higher, close to 20%. I'm just throwing out numbers. Mm-hmm. But as a total of vehicles on the road, we're still less than 2% in Canada.
Oh, it's that low.
It's still very early. So yeah, but 10% is kind of that sweet spot. I like that number, because that kind of accomplishes the goal we touched on earlier, where, hey, you want to over deploy infrastructure to change perception, right? Because that's why the government's giving this money out. They want you to over deploy to make sure every tenant who comes in your building feels comfortable they can buy an electric vehicle. Yeah. Yeah.
So what about, whenever it comes to the specific chargers that, you're having manufactured and sold through Electric Avenue with your software, are these fully integrated with like any kind of vehicle? Is there some that won't charge on them, or?
That's a good question. That is a good question. The answer is all vehicles will charge now. So the chargers we're deploying for apartment buildings, there's two types of chargers really left. Like level 1, we don't care about anymore because it's almost useless. It's 120 volts, plugged into a regular outlet. Yeah. On any modern electric vehicle, I think the top 15 vehicles now in North America get over 500 kilometers of range on a single charge. That outlet's adding like 5 kilometers of range an hour. It's like putting a spare tire on that you can only drive 5 kilometers an hour. It's going to take you a very long time to get anywhere. So the chargers we talk about now practically are level 2 chargers. So 208, 240 volt AC into the vehicle. And then you have level 3, what used to be called level 3. Now they call it DC fast chargers or rapid charger.
Okay.
All the apartment buildings deploy level 2 chargers because it makes the most sense. So those are all universal.
Because you get the most longevity for distance out of those charges? Is that why?
Yeah, it's a mix of exactly that. So every vehicle takes the same connector now in North America in that range. So it's a J1772. And then if you drive a Tesla, there's an adapter for it.
So like that would work on a Ford Lightning.
Ford Lightning, every vehicle for level 2 chargers has a J1772 port, except Tesla, they use an adapter. So you're kind of good there.
Elon's just got to be different, eh?
He's got to be different, and I'll give him credit. They've deployed so much infrastructure. Like we have a Lightning in our company fleet, and we have a couple Teslas. And I went down to Maine recently for the long weekend. We went skiing down in Sugarloaf, and I took the Tesla as opposed to the Ford because Tesla charging infrastructure is so good. Right. So yeah, Elon has to be different, 1, but 2, they invested. They have over 17,000 fast chargers globally.
They're like an infrastructure company more than a car.
It's incredible how much. Like that trip was tolerable. I will say that. Like I had
that's a good word.
Yeah, it was tolerable in the Tesla. I had a buddy,
the best way possible.
Yeah, I had a buddy who came with me. I called it a mutiny by the end because when you're used to stopping for 5 minutes for gas, I think we had to make 2 stops on the way home to charge. Right, 45-minute stops, let's say. So we added, it added maybe I say 10%.
How far a drive is that? I mean, it's got to be.
It's normally 9 hours. It took us like 10 and a bit. So that was with the Tesla. But I called it a mutiny because by the end he was getting so angry. So I was like, you have to start baiting them. It's like a Pavlovian response. I was buying them lotto tickets and like donuts to keep them entertained for the stops. Funny. But yeah, going back to what you were saying, the reason level 2 is so valuable. 1, the amount of power required is low. So level 2 chargers are like your stove. It's a 2-pole circuit, just like your stove, typically 40 or 48 amps, just like your stove.
Okay.
So it's an accessible amount of power for a building. Also, you mentioned it, the cars prefer it. So the cars would rather charge slowly. And when I say prefer it, it's better for battery degradation, like long-term battery maintenance, to charge the vehicle slow. If you're using those fast chargers off the highway, like our chargers that we supply for apartment buildings are 10 kilowatts. Those Tesla chargers I referenced are 150, so 15 times more energy. It's also far more than 15 times the cost to deploy, but worse for the batteries. And the other stats that everyone should know in the destination charging space, like workplace, home, is, the average Canadian only drives 67 kilometers a day. That's less than less than 2 hours on a charger a night. So you don't need, even when we do these buildings, interestingly enough,
especially downtown. I mean, a lot of people that are driving aren't driving that far.
Yeah, that's the average.
The HRM, the average. A lot of people would be far below that. I would be far below it, living in the south end.
Right. So you might be in the 10-kilometer range, and then someone coming from Enfield or Stewiacke is bringing that average to 67 or whatever it is. So that's a really good point in these apartment buildings. So what we do too, from a power standpoint, because everyone's like, where's the energy going to come from? Where's the power? Where's the infrastructure? We'll put up to 6 chargers on one circuit. And our software will load share them. So first car plugs in, gets the full amount of power. Second car will 50-50. And we can split that power down across 6 chargers. So you don't need as much electrical equipment to deploy the charging infrastructure.
Okay, and so if I'm looking at this very common sense, and I'm sure there's lots of people out there who know as little about this as I do. If I'm looking at a parkade, like are these stations positioned individually, like in a parking stall, like at the back on the concrete wall where in between the 2 yellow lines, or are they kind of in somewhere where people can drive by them, or how they depends on the unit, depends on the
the decision, construction. So the decision really is a construction decision. So we always try to keep the cost down.
So for the rough in on the electrical,
correct. Get them as close to the panel, all that
kind of stuff.
Yeah, get them as close to the electrical room as you can. But from a user experience standpoint, you want to dedicate a charger to a tenant or a charger to a parking spot.
I would kind of want my own.
Correct.
In my own parking spot.
Yeah, because the problem, we get this question frequently.
Imagine the fights down there over those. Man.
Fights are what happens. Like we have a feature in our software, and we primarily use it for like hotels or publicly available chargers, where we can charge a penalty if you don't turn the spot over. They call them like EV squatters, like squatters. So they'll plug in. They'll be done charging in an hour, but they'll leave it there for 6.
Oh, right. So they're hogging that.
They're hogging it. So, and I've been guilty of this early days where, that's a good parking spot. I'll plug in right for that parking spot. But as more people adopt, we've got to get away from that. So we have a penalty system that we can deploy in our software where if you don't unplug, we'll charge you, $15 every 10 minutes as a penalty. Like
that doesn't harm the battery at all, just to leave it plugged in, because
it's
going to stop.
It stops. There's a little control pin in the cable, and it sends a signal on this control pin, and it stops sending power. So no harm to the battery, but
you're burning power still.
No, you're not. It actually cuts the signal is sent, and it turns power off. But in an apartment building, for you, like you just mentioned, you want your own one, because if I come home at 9 o'clock at night, I don't want to get a notification from our app that says, hey, you're done charging at midnight, go move your car, right? You want the same use case scenario as a single family homeowner. I come home, I plug in, I go to bed, I get up, my car's ready to go. So for apartment buildings, like that's the experience. One charger per parking spot or per vehicle or per tenant.
Okay, here's another question from a construction standpoint. I'm assuming, a lot of your entry in the sales stream and the process is, you want to be there in the design phase. You want to talk to the developer, you want to talk to the architect, you want to catch this stuff upstream. So your product's going to be in these buildings, and hopefully they're forward thinking their design. Then there's, you could be talking about retrofits, a lot of big commercial buildings that would have parkades, being redone, big interior renovation. Maybe you can work it into the new architectural, electrical drawings and all that kind of stuff. What about existing buildings where, a developer or building asset owners are interested in having some of these? How hard is it to route the electrical in an existing parkade to have some of these? Or are there certain kinds of units that can be kind of wall mounted and run with cabling, fixed to the concrete instead of inside the wall assembly? Is there stuff like that? Is that
it's that's a great one, because here's one thing I found that I think is interesting. In many instances, it's easier to retrofit chargers right now in older buildings than a brand new building that never had any electrical capacity planning for chargers. Because in older buildings, I find 2 things. One, they've become incredibly efficient over the years. So LED lighting, new air handling units, new efficient heating systems or boilers, or they converted from electrical to natural gas or whatever it is. As a rule of thumb, I see buildings have become significantly more efficient. So their electrical loads have actually decreased from their original design.
Okay, I get
so
what you're saying.
Yeah, that's one thing. And the other thing that I find interesting about older buildings is now, because of the way we build, and it's not a good thing or a bad thing, but architects are squeezing those electrical rooms for every square foot. You go in a brand new building and it's like transformers stacked on transformer, it's 36 inches between things. It's hard to move. You go in these older buildings and there's a lot of real estate in those electrical rooms to add things like new services, new transformers, new distribution, new panels. So new buildings sometimes that didn't have any provisions are actually more difficult to retrofit. And then on the brand new construction side, we definitely have some progressive engineers. I say progressive, some engineers we work with who are calling us up saying, hey, what do I need to do to make sure this building, going back to things like load sharing, the chargers and all these variables, they're preparing. And then, credit to Efficiency Nova Scotia. You may know of Efficiency Nova Scotia.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, they just put out a program called, I believe it's called EV Ready Planning. They'll pay for up to 75% of the engineering on a new build or an existing build to figure out how to get the EV infrastructure in place. So yeah, we're starting to move there. We're definitely behind the construction curve as far as that goes, because you go to places like Vancouver, they have municipal EV readiness requirements already. You can't build a new building in Vancouver without submitting a plan that shows, hey, I'm going to get this building to 100% EV chargers in the next 10 years, 15 years.
That legislation's already in place.
Yeah, municipally.
So in Vancouver, municipally, you have to have EV chargers in your new commercial building.
Correct. And they require things like I just described, load share, because they don't want you overusing power either, or over dedicating circuits to chargers. They want 4-to-1 load share ratios on these chargers.
So with your, you've mentioned the private developers in the city that, some are more proactive with this than others. You've got some success with many of the bigger ones. What about public municipality? Anything there to talk about, or any success there, or any progress? Or
so municipal,
I'm thinking like whether it's a public office space or a government building, or even parks.
So public has not, if you look at the whole EV infrastructure landscape, it's big, it's broad, like how much charging infrastructure is needed. Our focus has really been on fleets, dealerships, and multi-unit residential buildings, but inevitably we've started to find success, and multi-tenant commercial, I should say that too, but mostly workplace.
It's hard to distinguish because some people see that as commercial. If it's multi-res or commercial,
correct. And I call it multi-tenant commercial, like a strip mall or stuff like that, or
retail tenants.
Retail tenants, or even workplaces are another great example where I think our hardware and software is perfectly paired. Or matched for. But we did have success recently with Inverness County, so they should have theirs online soon. We did 14 level 2 chargers, destination chargers, at a lot of tourist areas, like close to beaches and things like that, because that county was really progressive.
So these chargers like somewhere outside in the parking lot near the beach then?
Yeah, correct. Right. And actually they had to bring power. We did 2 unique things there. We didn't do the power, of course, because we only supply, but they brought power in off existing poles. So they ran services because there was no building infrastructure there. So they ran services off existing poles.
Specifically for your units.
Specifically for the units. And the other thing we did, which is cool, our chargers, you can put SIM cards. So we actually sell SIM packages for 4G for data. Because to do payment processing and user access control in our software, they've got to be networked. So those chargers, we shipped them, every single charger, I think it was 14, with pedestals to mount them on. We shipped them with SIM cards in them. So they don't even need to connect them to a network or the Wi-Fi. They just sit on the cell network and talk back to our servers.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And so what about the app? The app that's part of the product offering. Is like, maybe tell us a little bit about that for our listeners.
So the app, and this is common in the industry, and it's actually one of the complaints of a lot of EV drivers right now, is how you need an app for everybody's charging network.
Right.
And we're no different, but we are trying to make it easier. But if you want to interact with or transact with our chargers, you've got to download our app. It's Electric Avenue. It's in the Google Store, Google Play, or the App Store. So you download the app and you enter your credit card in there once, or multiple credit cards if you want different payment options. And then when you pull up to the charger, and this again is not unique to us, it's common in the industry, there's a QR code. So the cheapest and most cost-effective way to deploy hardware is scan the QR code, initiate the transaction, and it will build that credit card on file. We also allow RFID cards. Those are really popular for apartment buildings, or RFID keychains. And you can even use the same ones that you use for building access control. Right? So those, same idea, you tie that RFID card to your account and it builds the credit card that's on file in our system. But where we're all trying to get to, and what our chargers are capable of, and this is a little too technical for most, but anyway, right now the problem is if you use a charge point charger, flow charger, our charger, anyone's charger, it's like I need a different app, I got to install it, all that, right? Every charger's got a different app.
You see, you go to someone's place or this place, even on a trip, like you got 3 different apps to use on one trip.
That's it. Right? Exactly. You do that road trip with the non-Tesla vehicles like I talked about, and you've got an app for every charger. But what we've done as an industry, which is kind of cool, and we're just starting to transition to this, Tesla set the gold bar. Tesla builds the vehicles, they build the chargers, they build the software. You plug into a Tesla charger with a Tesla vehicle, you just plug it in and walk away. It knows it's your vehicle. It knows what your credit card is, and it just starts billing you for that charging session. Problem with all of us who are trying to be in the open source or, you know, outside the Tesla landscape is it's different vehicles, different chargers, different software. So how do we all talk together? So the ISO has set out a standard. It's called 15118. And now the vehicles are coming built to this ISO standard. And all of our chargers, that's a differentiator for us, really. All of our chargers are also built to this new ISO standard. So they run a different firmware, different software, and they talk to our server on a different protocol, which will allow for, they call it plug-in charge. So now if I plug in with my Ford, my Hyundai, my Porsche, my Audi, as soon as I plug into that charger, because the vehicle's been built to that standard, now I can put my credit card information in my vehicle app, say the Ford Pass app, for example. I put my credit card info in there, I plug into my charger, and now through a secure token, your credit card can get sent to our charger, and we can transact without you having to, you know, operate the charger or download our app or anything like that. So we're getting there.
Right.
Our chargers are built to that standard. Our software is built to that standard, but that's kind of where we need to get to.
What's ISO stand for?
It's the international, International Standards Organization.
Okay.
Yeah. Because again, you're trying to get all the major manufacturers of vehicles and all the major manufacturers of chargers and software to figure it out together. So the ISO has stepped in, and some people
forces everybody to work together.
Well, the thing with the standard is it doesn't force, but I think that's what we need to do as, like, you know, citizens of this industry, is make sure we're providing software and hardware that's compatible with these standards. Because if you don't, it's going to kill adoption, right? One bad experience, it's no different. You walk into a restaurant, it's something like 60 touch points, one goes bad. And it's the same with EVs.
You don't lose that customer.
That's it. Same with EVs. If I love everything about my EV, you know, that Lightning, I love it. It does 0 to 60 in like 3.9 seconds. It's incredible. But if I'm waiting 3 hours on my way to New Brunswick to charge, I probably won't buy another one.
No.
Right? Or have a bad experience. Yeah.
So a couple things. You know, you mentioned that this legislation is passed in Vancouver. You know, for the future, where things are at now with your pulse on the market and you know, when it comes to EV chargers and commercial and retail, multi-res, like, do you see, say 5 years from now, like, will it be the fact that, you know, a new build's not going to be done without at least some EV element for charging stations in a parkade? And then what about the municipalities? Like, do you see legislation ever going from the West Coast to the East Coast and that happening sometime? I'm sure it's going to take a bit longer for that one, but.
Yeah. Oh, in my ideal world, legislation.
Ideally, yeah.
In my ideal world, you know, but it's the old, you know, Daniel Pink talks about it in Drive. He's like, you want to hit someone with a hammer, or you don't want to dangle a carrot, or do you want to provide like value to them? And, you know, I think legislation sometimes is hitting people with the hammer, and that will only go so far. So I think legislation helps, but, you know, having the people who can influence it just start to standardize on this, like the developers. I think they carry a lot of leverage right now in this, you know, path to electrification or an electrified transportation system.
You say a responsibility in some ways, or?
I would love to say that, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we were just at Build Green Atlantic. You know, they had 10 times more people engaged with them this year than when they had it last time prior to the pandemic. So that had been 3 years ago. It was really successful. You know, a lot of people there from all kinds of different capacities for the path to net zero, the green, you know, when it comes to renewables, renewable products, you know, and lots of good stories with developers who've been really forward thinking and early adopters and all kinds of different things, right, toward that. And you're dealing with a client base there that, you know, lots of high dollars, lots of stress, big timelines. You know, when it comes to making decisions, a lot of times not to any fault of their own, it's going to come down to dollars and cents. And can we make this work, right? Even if they do have say a passion for it, right? I mean, it's got to make sense for them financially, and there's got to be sometimes more of that kind of incentive than anything else. And really, that's the kind of just like that's always going to be the dictator. You're going to live and die by the numbers. That's how these guys live, because they have to live that way. Or
these are private businesses. These are private businesses.
Yeah, and you can say what you want about you know, developers. They're a crucial part of the ecosystem, right? And but it's definitely a unique spot you're in to get that, you know, to get your specific products in there.
Yeah, and the economics, I think that's the most important point for any business to make it past you know, because we talked about less than 2% of the cars. So if you look at that product adoption curve, we're still in the...
It's not high enough for them to...
We're early adopters. We're still very early adopters. And I think there's a term even before early adopters, like fanatics or something, like people who will
But yeah, you've had some success, though.
Yeah. And even going back to the developers, you know, I won't quote the developer, but I think it's an important quote. And it's like, why, you know, we went in there trying to sell charging infrastructure to a developer, a very well-known developer. I have tons of respect for him, but he laid it out. You just talked about the business of it. It's like, you know, why do I care right now about this when my buildings are 99.9% occupancy, right? I'm not having vacancy issues. I don't need differentiators. I'm worried about, you know, at times, say, fighting the city for approvals on projects, and you've got me focused on something that's not moving the needle on my business as much as they may care about the environment and the green
because it's not at the point yet where that 99.9% is going to drop to 95 because he doesn't have EV charging stations. But that might happen in 5 years, 10 years. And my question is, why do they, like, could they be looking at it as almost like, well, this is going to be the case in 5 years. So if you're just putting up a $40 million building up here on the arm, why don't you have it in there? Because, you know, that's a we'll say building assets, 60-year investment, about 100 years, hopefully. But that's a long time.
A long time.
So even though it isn't that time yet, kind of is, because you're dealing with a building that's a product that has a 60-year life cycle technically, and longer than that, a lot longer, hopefully.
Yeah.
So why not do this now if it's happening?
If it's
going to
happen. And that's the conversation we typically have. Yeah, there's an ROI if there's funding. Okay, if you get a tenant in there who's charging and you're buying the power for 15 cents a kilowatt hour and you're selling it for 30 cents a kilowatt hour, you know, we can do a simple ROI payback because we have the data, right? We have enough chargers under management to tell them that story. But I always push the scarcity piece. Like, the funding is available now.
It may not be.
It may not be, because once this thing moves from early adopters to early majority, that's when all of a sudden the government, this thing is self-propelling now, right? We don't need to put a bunch of stimulus. We don't need the IRA down the US, the Inflation Reduction Act pushing it. We don't need... You know, just look at the Super Bowl this year. Like, I think there was like 8 or 9 EV commercials. Like, they're phenomenal vehicles. It's just the infrastructure potentially could kill the adoption. But if you don't go after infrastructure now, if you don't go after funding now, eventually it won't be there. And then you're paying full pot for it. And the ROI story is not as lucrative. Yeah,
this is going to seem like a weird connection, but we had a guy talking about on our podcast about radon and the new risks with that. And, you know, one of the things they're doing now is making sure that we'll call it infrastructure, the rough-ins and things are done, even if the radon units aren't being placed in as part of the build. The rough-ins are there for the fact that you're going to need it, and it might be legislation soon.
Smart.
Like, so what about you know, telling these building owners, like, it's gonna be a lot more expensive to put this in after, or at least prepping these buildings so that you can fit your units in there, or the rough-ins are done, or the electrical room has this much room, or is any of that going on?
Not formally. Again, the legislation's not there, and we just have a few engineers in our circle here locally. Now, we sell nationally, so we have sales groups across the country. Yeah, it's going on in Vancouver. It's going on in Quebec. You know, we're seeing it in some municipalities in Ontario. Unfortunately, not here. We're seeing some engineers who recognize it, who work with the multi-unit residential development community. And then you have programs, like I mentioned earlier, that just came out, like this EV readiness. Like, okay, now we'll help you pay for this. But yeah, you're absolutely right. And it's not even the infrastructure per se. Like, I don't need you to give me a new transformer today. I don't need the panel in there today. Just size the service accordingly, like from NSP, and size the electrical room accordingly. You know, you don't need to spend $100,000 on distribution gear, electrical distribution gear, to be EV ready, but you better make sure your service is ready and that you can put that transformer in the electrical room at some point.
Anything else we didn't talk about that you might want to mention on behalf of Catalyst or on behalf of Electric Avenue? Just kind of push out there to our listeners. We touched on lots of stuff, but
yeah, I think, you know, I touched on it briefly, but what we like to do, as much as, you know, we're a private business too, and we need to make some money off hardware and software to keep this thing growing and running. One thing we've always done for private developers is help them access the funds. Because as much as I say there's funds out there and available, it's a convoluted process. It's a government RFP with a whole lot of red tape and hoops to jump through.
And nobody's excited to tackle those.
And not, you know, and you were talking about progressive developers earlier, like, you know, Peter Pauly, I think is one, like as far as green, you know, the green side of construction goes, I think he's probably one of the most progressive. Most people would agree.
We've heard
that I know of in Atlantic, Canada. And, you know, but for him, same idea. Like a lot on the go, but doesn't maybe have the capacity from a business standpoint to go after some of these funds. So that's one thing I'll put out there. If anybody just wants to, we don't lock you into our charges. We don't lock you into software. If people just want to go after the funding, we help them at no charge.
Yeah, so reach out to you guys.
Yeah,
reach out to partners like your Efficiency NS partnership.
Yeah,
and
so
like
we'll help them at least get the funding, and then maybe we'll build a relationship in the process, and maybe we'll sell them chargers someday. But that's something we do. You know, it has an altruistic component to it where we'll just help them get the funding, because it can be a lot of work and it can be technical and it can be convoluted, and we'll always dedicate resources in our capacity to help people go after some of this funding that's out there.
Yeah, I'm sure that's going to be good for them to know, because not only is it about, you know, just dollars and cents, it's about dollars and cents now. Like, how much money do I have to spend now? And if you don't have to spend this money now, I'm not going to spend it. It's really hard to talk to developers into doing that.
You know it, yeah.
That's awesome, man. Look, I really appreciate your time today, Mark. It's great to hear some of your story and all about Electric Avenue and Catalyst and all the great things you're doing, man. And wish you a ton of success. And just thank you so much for coming on and sharing with us and for being with us here today. It's been great.
Awesome. Maybe we'll see you on the volleyball courts.
Yeah, I'll have to get out there.
Summer's here. Yeah,
man. Let's go. Let's get that going. Cheers, man. This episode is brought to you by Cook Insurance, your trusted insurance broker in Atlantic, Canada for 50 years. Insurance is complex, and the Cook team focuses on delivering comprehensive solutions for your construction needs, including builder's risk, wrap-up liability, performance bonds, and project-specific construction. A Navicord partner since 2020, Cook is one of the largest construction brokers in Canada and offers national strength with a local touch. Whatever your insurance needs are, Cook has you covered.
The team at Atlantic Construction Podcast have been able to build a strong relationship with the folks over at FCA Surety. FCA Surety is heavily engaged in supporting the Atlantic construction marketplace and helping contractors to build their businesses, and we can't recommend them enough. While FCA has their head office in Ontario, many of the members of their team have lived in Atlantic, Canada and worked in the construction community here. This gives them a unique national perspective with a local flavor. Andrew Cartwright leads FCA's national surety operations as Vice President of Surety. Their knowledge of the bonding marketplace and understanding of how insurance companies view your business is unparalleled. In addition, the depth of their team and reach across Canada gives them the ability to draw on numerous experiences to help clients navigate items like subtrade, construction disputes, liens, and supplier risk management. These are the things that separate FCA Surety from the pack. Make sure to give the guys a call over at FCA Surety for all of your bonding and surety needs.